4-month-old Irega is a refugee and an orphan. We found him in a shelter for severely malnourished children. His mother died here in childbirth. His father was murdered in Sudan. So he has no father and no mother. All he has
is grandmother.
One of the things you notice is just how many kids there are. Because most of the men are missing or dead, 90% of the refugees are women and children.
Can you see in there? Do you see yourself? You can almost see yourself in there, can't you?
Scott Pelley now, back from reporting in Sudan.
The United Nations calls it the greatest crisis in the world today. The United States calls it genocide. It's happening in the African nation of Sudan, and we went there to see for ourselves. What we saw and what you will see tonight is evidence of a government-backed campaign to wipe out a race. There are at least 50,000 dead and 1 million on the run. It all started a year and a half ago in a part of Sudan called Darfur. Rebels looking for a measure of freedom revolted against Sudan's authoritarian Islamic government. The government apparently decided to end the revolt by trying to wipe out all of the native Africans in Darfur, to clear the territory for Arabs. We should tell you that some of the evidence of the killing that we found is hard to watch, but we will start with the survivors. They are the innocent victims pouring across the border of Sudan into Chad.
There are 10 refugee camps, much like this one, all up and down the Chad-Sudan border. Some are larger, some are smaller. This camp has about 19,000 refugees, but in the entire region there are 189,000 refugees, and the United Nations is planning for another 100,000 on top of that. This camp is the farthest north, which means it's in the driest part of the Sahara. And walking around this place, one thing strikes you. If this is better than where they came from, imagine what they're fleeing.
This is one of their villages burning in Sudan. The Sudanese government has unleashed African Arabs called the Janjaweed to wipe out all of the tribal blacks. The name Sudan, ironically, is Arabic, meaning land of the blacks. But the Janjaweed is rewriting that history in blood. Janjaweed, by the way, has a translation too. It means evil on horseback.
What has been happening to these people over the last 17 months or so?
They've been subjected to one of the most brutal campaigns of ethnic cleansing that Africa has ever seen.
John Prendergast was the Director of African Affairs at the National Security Council in the Clinton White House. He's now with the International Crisis Group, a human rights organization, documenting the disaster in Sudan and neighboring Chad.
A government-made hurricane hit Darfur over the last 17 months using these Janjaweed militias, and the human debris has washed up here on the shores of Chad.
The arid shores of one of the most forbidding regions on earth. The refugees are from Sudan's western province, Darfur, a region the size of Texas. The ones Prendergast calls lucky are survivors, many of whom were chased across the desert border into Chad by the Janjaweed.
The Janjaweed are like a grotesque mixture of the mafia and the Ku Klux Klan. And these guys have a racist ideology that sees the Arab population as the supreme population that would like to see the subjugation of non-Arab peoples. They're criminal racketeers that have been supported very directly by the government to wage the war against the people of Darfur.
Just look at the battlefield in this picture from space. It's one large Darfur village. Nearly every home and building is gone. There are almost 600 villages, and nearly 400 of them look like this. Survivors say the attacks usually start at dawn, with bombs falling from planes of the Sudanese Air Force.
And then here come the Janjaweed on camel or on horseback. They come rolling into the town, shooting and torching the village, often bringing women to the side and raping women indiscriminately. And in order to ensure that the destruction is complete, the government either sends ground forces to oversee the operation or the attack helicopters, which often are the most deadly things.
They arrived on horseback, killed my husband, and took my son.
8 months later, Tuna Ismail Abdullah still doesn't know what happened to her son. She left Sudan with 5 surviving children after the Janjaweed burned her village.
They never gave me a chance to talk to my child. Some of them dragged my son away, others slaughtered my husband, and some others took me to the side and tortured me and left me there. My newborn was snatched off my back, was left lying on the ground. I found him when they let me go.
Zara Abel Karim lost 8 members of her family.
They attacked us very early in the morning. Some militiamen on horseback, camels, and some soldiers in military vehicles. There was an airplane above.
What did you see after the attack started?
They burned the village. They killed some people, slashed their throats, and captured others.
What happened to your family?
My husband was killed. 2 of my children, 2 sisters, and 3 of my brothers.
To get to Chad, Zara walked 10 days, carrying a 1-year-old boy, now her only child. They found refuge in the sprawling camps, which are an emergency response by the International Rescue Committee and the United Nations. They're holding the desert back here with nothing more than tarps and trucks. Tents that go up white are soon painted by the Sahara. Food comes in from hundreds of miles away: beans, sugar, and flour. Water flows in 1 tanker at a time. It is bare survival, with famine waiting for the day that the trucks don't come. 4-month-old Irega is a refugee and an orphan. We found him in a shelter for severely malnourished children. His mother died here in childbirth. His father was murdered in Sudan.
So he has no father and no mother. All he has
He has his grandmother.
is the grandmother, and he's got 5 brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
His grandmother, Aza Isa, pours formula past his lips all day long to wash away the hunger that nearly killed him. Many of the children here bear the look of the hunted and the haunted. They're people holding on in the midst of a genocide that aims to exterminate them. One of the things you notice is just how many kids there are, because most of the men are missing or dead. 90% of the refugees are women and children.
Hello.
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 Wow.
How are you?
It's been a long journey for them.
Yeah, these guys have been through hell and back, and it's just amazing. Look at the smiles and the resiliency. The Zagawa people, these are the people that are legendary within Sudan for their survival skills.
One woman told me she carried her 1-year-old child for 12 days just to get here.
Now, these are the survivors. For many of those people, that was a death march. I mean, there were people that they had to bury along the way.
These are the lucky children.
Yeah, these are lucky ones.
If you can imagine in a place like this being called lucky, these are the lucky ones.
It tells you something about what's going on in Sudan today, if these are lucky.
Can you see in there? Do you see yourself? You can almost see yourself in there, can't you?